My name is Darmadi Como. I'm Senior Product Manager at Microsoft in Redmond. And I'll be joined today by Guy Bowerman, also Senior Program Manager. I'm from marketing side, he's from engineering side. So I'll be speaking on the slide a little bit. But I want to draw your attention to this laminate form, the poster that we give to you guys. For those of you who did not get one, go down to the booth for database. We'll have the actual size poster for you. Okay? So if you are in the session earlier, then you can get this thing. So we gave away a lot this week. We want to let you follow this along when I go through the presentation, so we don't PowerPoint you to that, right? So anyway, let's get started. And then we're very excited that you can join us. So a lot of the things that I'll talk about is only a few slides, and then Guy Bowman, he's going to do a lot of demos. So this is a very heavy demo session, and he's going to go through the demo on each of this area here that we're going to talk about soon. So this is the agenda today. I'll go through, I think, about 10 slides. Why private cloud, and then we go through each pillar of the SQL Server for private cloud. Each one of them from resource pooling, elasticity, self-service, control, and customize. And then we'll show you what's available today out there that we publish on our website. It's already out there this week that you can download and you can play with it, what we're showing you today. Okay? With that, let's get started. I'm sure you all know that you guys are doing virtualization. A lot of companies doing it, if not planning to do it soon. These are just some of the publicly available surveys that I collected so far. A lot of them is 2011, so it's brand new. That basically says everybody is embarking into virtualization, or in fact, they're going to go to private cloud as a next step already in the next 12 to 24 months. And it's spanned across commercial, also federal agencies, right? So it's all of the places is the same. And then when you talk about private cloud, then things like, obviously, you have to virtualize your environment first, but then you start talking about self-service and so on and so forth. This is catching up very quickly for a customer who's already done virtualization. So whatever we're going to share with you today will encompass of not only consolidation, virtualization, but also self-service as well, right? How is that pertaining with SQL Server? Okay. Just quick show of hand, how many of you here are DBAs? Okay, maybe half of the room. Okay, this will be very relevant to you. The rest of you may be like IT administrator, I hope, right? Any IT administrator here? Okay. So I wonder where's the rest of you guys? Developers? Okay. All right. So obviously, we're going to talk about infrastructure. We're going to talk about SQL Server, right? And then we're going to mention a little bit about development. Guy is going to show you some websites. But let me draw your attention to this laminate chart. Okay, so this is what I distribute to you guys. We'll be going through 4 things today, the 4 pillars of optimized SQL Server for private cloud. First one is resource pooling. We'll be talking about resource pooling. This is mainly consolidating your database. This is step number 1. Each of these pillars, we will go through the benefits and we'll go through the logical steps, right? And then Guy is going to do the demo on each of these pillars so that you can get it, right? Today, what we're showing you is a do-it-yourself solution, DIY architecture. Later, I'll talk about other offerings that we're going to provide you after this session. Right, so we're going to start with the resource pooling and move on to elasticity, where you can scale your resources, scale out, or scale up. And then we're going to start talking about the self-service portion, right, which is something new that people who does virtualization, something that they want to do, and then control and customize, right? Okay, so the first one is the resource pooling. Okay, so resource pooling is none other that you want to have a consolidation of all the IT resources. And the very first step that we're going to talk about is discover what you have out there in your network and make sure, in this case, since we focus on SQL Server, so a database workload, we're going to use a tool called Map Toolkit. How many of you know about Map Toolkit? Just, okay, not a lot of you. Okay, it's a free download tool that Microsoft has been made available. This is 5.5. 6.0 is going to come up very soon as well, as well as the Microsoft Consolidation Planning tool. So let me describe what it does. The SQL Server sprawl, meaning that you have many SQL Server instances in your network. Sometimes you don't know where it is and which server is located. So this tool is a read-only tool that allows you to scan your network to find out what SQL Server available out there. And the 5.5 here, interestingly, that not only allow you to scan SQL Server instances, we also allow you to scan non-SQL Server instances such as MySQL, Sybase, and Oracle. Right? So one tool, you can scan all of them. You know what it is. You'll produce a nice report that Guy will show you soon. And then you have option either to upgrade to the latest SQL Server 2008 R2 using the Upgrade Advisor here. Or if you have non-SQL Server databases, we have a free SQL Server Migration Assistant. It's also a free download that you can use it to migrate, let's say, MySQL or Oracle to SQL Server. Right? It migrates schema and data and so on and so forth, as well as the PL SQL, right? The apps as well. So it's very, very powerful tool. It's freely available that you can consider. So this is kind of step number one. First, you need to discover what's out there, and then you want to consolidate, right? And in order to do that, System Center, we're going to make use of a lot of the System Center tool here, as you'll see in the presentation. It will help you migrate your physical infrastructure to virtual, right? It has a widget that Guy is going to show you also that allows you to move your physical database to a virtual, a VM, right? It will not kill the virtual, right? It's a read-only, but it will just grab what is the settings, all the data and everything, move it to a Hyper-V environment, right? And once you move it there, you will be able to manage those using either Hyper-V Manager or Virtual Machine Manager from System Center, right? So this is really the key steps for pillar number one, resource pooling, is to consolidate all your database asset into a single location. With that, I'm going to turn over to Guy, who's going to walk you through the demo. Okay?
Thanks, Damadi. So that's good to see. So the scenario that I'm going to use for all of these demos is a publishing company called Lucerne Publishing. They have retail bookstores all over the country, and they're divided up into different business units. So, for example, sales, finance, marketing. And there's a central IT group which provides IT services for all of these business units. Now, what tends to happen is that if the business unit needs something in a hurry, it tends to take shortcuts, so they provision their own servers. Also, the stores manage their own systems. So what tends to happen is that the IT group doesn't always know exactly what's running in their network. And even if they do know about all the database server instances, they don't necessarily have all the sizing information that they need, all the versioning and sizing information they need to make intelligent decisions when it comes to consolidating and moving their data center to a private cloud. So what the IT group are going to run is the Microsoft Assessment Planning Toolkit. So I'll go into there and run it. So this version, as Damadi says, it can gather information not just on SQL Server instances and others such as Sybase and Oracle, but also there's a whole range of different software it can actually scan. So when I run it for the first time, it gives me an option to use an existing database or select a database to use. So I'll use an existing database. And then next, I'm going to run the inventory and assessment wizard. So here, the inventory scenarios that I'm interested in are the database servers. So I'm going to click on SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, and Sybase. Then for this scan, I'm just going to use the Active Directory domain services. So for this, I need to specify a domain. So the internal domain they use is lucerne.msft. And then I'll specify a domain account. Yes, it would be. Yeah.
Or at least account that be able to access those instances. If you don't have
you may be able to assign specific permissions to an operator user. I can't say I've tried that, though, so we could look into that. So I'm going to say find all computers in all domains, containers, and organizational units. And then to actually query the software on all these computers, I'm going to specify account credentials for that. So, so the question is, what will this look like to internal security? So I think what you're saying there is that the internal security may have some reservations about a scan this thorough running on the system. I think it's certainly something that you would want to do with active cooperation of internal security with a very specific set of objects that you're looking for and monitored. I agree with you that it's, if I was central security, I might be a bit nervous about a scanning tool like this. Right, so it partly depends what you're scanning for. So for scanning the SQL Server instances, sure, yeah. So I'll keep the default credentials order and the default connection properties for SSH. So it gives me a summary of everything I picked, and away it goes. Now this can take a few minutes, so what I'll do is show you some of the summary reports that it generates. And we've created some for a larger network. So I'll run the first one, which is the SQL Server assessment. So this, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it gives a basic summary of the number of instances of different SQL Server components. Then I can go in more detail on the SQL Server instances and in more detail on the components. Then if I want to drill further into the database details, and it's useful having it in a form of a spreadsheet like this, because then you can use output like this as input for tools like the CPT, the consolidation planning tool that SQL Cat makes that Damadi mentioned. So if I go more deeper into the SQL Server instances, it breaks it down by version, and then it gives a summary of every instance, and then a database summary, and then what's useful there is that there's detailed sizing information about all the databases. So this really helps make an informed decision when it comes to consolidation. So there's a summary of database instances, database instance properties, and also all the database users on all your database instances.
When you started the scanning, you selected a database. Is that where this information is stored, the inventory that it does? Is it stored in there, or what is that database?
Yes, it stores this information because you can also access a lot of this information from the planning tool as well, planning toolkit itself. So yes, it uses that database for that information.
So if I don't have an inventory database, I must create one.
Sure, yeah. So it also produces these summary reports in a nicely formatted Word document. So here's the SQL Server Discovery report. And it gives you an overview of different SQL Server versions, and then it provides information and tips on upgrading to SQL Server 2008 R2. And then also, we also scanned the different Sybase MySQL Oracle databases. So we can look at the migration discovery. So it breaks down the different, these different databases, and then it gathers certain information about them for MySQL, Oracle, and Sybase. And then also goes with that, you can generate a migration proposal. So this gives a summary of all of these instances in your network and gives some tips on why you might want to migrate to SQL Server and what the next steps are in doing that. So it's all useful information to have if you're planning a consolidation project. So let's say we've done all that. Now I'll just see how the inventory scan is still running, so I won't go there for now. Instead, I'll go to Virtual Machine Manager. Let's say that the publishing company has started creating their private cloud, and they've already consolidated some instances. They've got some virtual machines running. If we go to hosts, here's the host that's running, and we can look at the host properties and get an idea of what kind of resources we have on this host. Now, from here, the simplest in terms of administration workload to move a physical machine to a private cloud would be to just do a straight physical to virtual conversion. So there's an option here which is convert physical server, which is what we call our P2V wizard. So here you can enter the computer name or IP address, and you can go through a wizard, and it will do a complete conversion of a physical machine into a virtual machine. And then you can locate that on the host that you require. Sometimes you might want to do more careful consolidation where you maybe want to consolidate databases, but certainly the lowest cost in terms of administration is to do a straight conversion. So just to recap what I went through, we discovered the SQL sprawl. We ran the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit. We generated a detailed and summary reports of what it discovered on the network. We ran the Virtual Machine Manager to view the private cloud resources, and we started the P2V wizard to do a physical to virtual conversion.
Okay.
Sure.
Does that tool only scan the current domain?
Will the tool only scan the current domain?
If I have servers with other domains,
You can definitely run it multiple times for different domains. I'm not sure if you can specify all different domains at the same time. I actually thought you could in that.
You can also specify like IP address ranges as well. So it doesn't have to be like Active Directory if you're not having Active Directory. For example, everybody should have Active Directory, but if you don't have it, then you can do IP range as well. Right? So you can span across multiple domains. Couple more questions.
Does it make an estimate of how long it will take? Excuse me. I don't believe it does, no. So that's something, generally we advise start with the simplest database, start with the smallest databases and build experience as you go through. It's going to depend a lot on things like your disk hardware. So, yes? So does the conversion apply to SQL Server in a clustered environment? So the physical to virtual conversion, it basically shouldn't make any difference. The question is, of course, what about the interaction with the physical cluster? There you're going to need to do something extra, because if you're running on a SAN, you may need to go and look once you've converted to a virtual machine how that's actually running on the SAN. So that would imply some additional administration work.
On the second pillar, I'll go through how to create the clustering on the VM environment as well. So that's the next step. Actually, we want to do that. Once you convert all the, like you said, single instance, you want to make sure that it's high available so that you can use the other features that clustering will provide, right? So let me just quickly go through the benefits. So it will obviously, when you consolidate all the databases here, you will reduce your capital expenses because you standardize everything, let's say in VMM. You reduce your operational expenses because no longer that you need to manage this all over the places. In Green IT, reduce your power need for every physical server that's running databases, right? So let's go through the second pillar, which is the elasticity. And what happened is once you consolidate all the VMs into one single location or one data center, you want to be able to provide things like high availability, scale, and things like that, right? So let's go through this pillar, elasticity. So first, you need to set up, we recommend the clustering. In the latest Windows and SQL, we support both host clustering, obviously, as well as guest clustering, right? Or mix of them, right, between those two. So what will happen is you move things to VM, you cluster them. Suddenly, then you can have more, faster recovery in case there's a failure in one VM, right? And this will make use of your existing SAN if you have those, shared storage, right? There's no different in here. It's running VM, right? And with that, not only you can get more high availability with this, you can also suddenly make use of other features that Hyper-V provides, such as live migration, right? So live migration, for those of you who's not familiar with that, allows us to move a virtual machine from one host to another without downtime at all, right? Obviously, this is during planned downtime operations where, for example, in this scenario, we're showing you that, let's say you want to upgrade the host, one host, like let's say upgrade the hardware. Let's say you want to put new service pack on it. Maybe you want to have patches on the thing. What you do first is to live migrate all the VMs that are running on that particular host to the other host first for temporary purpose, and then you upgrade your original host. Once you finish that, then you can live migrate back all the VMs, right? So it's a very, very powerful tool. You'll get this when you implement Hyper-V, right, with no downtime, okay? Not only that, a lot of times you don't know how much memory you need to assign for each VM, right? Workload can change. You don't know if there's a peak scenario in your situation. Might have, a lot of people will have those. So with the latest Service Pack 1 of Windows, we actually provide this thing called dynamic memory. So what it is essentially you assign a range of memory. You assign minimum and maximum memory for each virtual machines. Once you set it up and run, basically that virtual machines will just consume memory like up and down. It depends on the load of that virtual machines. And SQL Server in this case, because we support hot add memory in SQL Server, Enterprise Edition, so what happened is it can take additional memory as is needed, and it can release memory as if no longer needed, right? So it's very well integrated with Hyper-V dynamic memory in this case, running SQL. So you don't have to actually shut down the virtual machine, change the memory setting, and restart the VM. This time they can do it automatically, right? So this is very good for you to scale up during the peak scenario. Also, with System Center, VMM, and the Operations Manager, who's doing the monitoring of each VM, you can suddenly do load balancing, right? Let's say you have multiple hosts that's running this thing, and then one host is really incur a lot of workload for the VMs that are running on that. You can actually set up alert in Operations Manager that makes you aware, and then you can move the VM using live migration. Because live migration without any downtime, you can move VM from one host to another to load balance this thing. Some of you, I'm not sure if you attended sessions on VMM 2012. This is upcoming Virtual Machine Manager that will be released not long from now that basically will do this automatically. There's a load balancing component in there as well. So with that, I will turn over to Guy again. He's going to show you a demo on some of this. Okay, Guy?
All right, thanks. So in our publishing company scenario, let's go forward in time a little bit, and they've converted their data center into a private cloud. They've already started making cost savings in things like power and storage, and they want to become more efficient now and reduce management costs. So one way they can do that with a private cloud is to create virtual machine templates. So an example of that is every retail store has a point of sale system, and each point of sale system consists of a SQL Server and an ASP.NET web application. So since every point-of-sale system is pretty similar, then that's a good candidate to create a template. So anytime they need to provision a new point-of-sale system or replace the point-of-sale system, they can just deploy from a template. So that's what we're going to look at here. Now, one thing I mentioned is that each point-of-sale system has SQL Server installed. Has anyone run the SQL Server sysprep utility? So one problem that you might find if you install SQL Server on a machine, a virtual machine that you're preparing to deploy on other machines, is that you have a lot of objects which are tied to the machine name or the domain or accounts that you create. So what you do with sysprepping SQL Server is you do a partial install, and then you can create a configuration file and an installation file which will complete the install the first time someone logs on to a new virtual machine. So you create this sysprepped image, and then you sysprep Windows so that it's ready to run on any machine, and then you can save it as a template. So that's what I plan to do here. So what I'll first do is go and run the SQL Server installation program. So this is a machine, basically I'm preparing it to be a point-of-sale template. So here's the setup program. I'm going to go to Advanced, and there's an option, Image Preparation of a Standalone Instance of SQL Server. I'm not going to run it right now because it don't really have time to, but what it does, it does this preparation of your SQL Server image, and then from there I can show you the installation file, which we can then set to run the first time someone logs on. That's a separate sysprep.
So it just creates this, or does it also do some object-based SQL itself?
It does object-based sysprep for SQL. Yeah. So here's my install SQL file, and I'm going to set up the template to use this. And it runs setup.exe, and then a key flag that I'm passing is the configuration file. So let's look at the configuration file. If I look at the configuration file, there's one line that I'll draw your attention to. I like the configuration file, by the way. All of the different options to customize the installation are nicely labeled and described. But this one, I set action equals complete image. So what that means is when the setup program gets this configuration file, it will complete the installation when it's run. So having done that, we can go into Virtual Machine Manager and look at our libraries. So let's say I finished sysprepping this, and then I imported it to be a template. So here's my template, and I can go and look at properties for this template. So if I go and look at hardware configuration and operating system configuration, here the computer name is star, and what this means is it can randomly generate a computer name when you're using it as a template to create a new virtual machine. You can set the admin password, the product key, and what's important for us is it can set a script to run at first logon. So in this case, we're going to run the install SQL command. And obviously, you can make this script as complicated as you like to customize and to do some discovery at the time that the virtual machine is being deployed. I'll point out one other thing as well. Damadi mentioned Hyper-V dynamic memory. We're going to save some memory here by just specifying a startup and a maximum memory for our point-of-sale systems. Traditionally, what you'd do before Hyper-V 2008 Service Pack 1 is you'd try and think what's the maximum possible memory we'd need and set it to that value. Now, the Hyper-V memory scheduler can just assign as much memory as the operating system is demanding. Now, one reason that as memory optimization technologies go, I think this one works very well with databases because it's not a form of overcommit. The maximum memory may be more, the sum of the maximum memories may be more than you have on your host, but the actual assigned memory is always real memory. There's no paging going on. So it works very well with databases, but only databases that can actually dynamically detect a change in the memory on the system. So it works very well with SQL Server. So the last thing I'm going to do is go and connect to, let's say I use this template to deploy a system, and I'll go and connect to it. So here's the system. It's a point-of-sale system for New York. So if I run it, I run Internet Explorer. That's where the web application defaults to. And here's the web application, so I can enter in a product code, and it will start working with the database. So I can start doing, interacting with the database. Now, one other thing I'll show you here is let's look at how much memory is actually assigned to it at this point. So it's showing the physical memory as 655 megabytes. So just for this simple point-of-sale application, I didn't need 1 gigabyte, so I'm not using 1 gigabyte. So that memory can be used elsewhere in the system to increase the VM density on the host. So just to recap, we created a sysprept template resource for a point-of-sale system. Then we configured it to set up SQL Server at first logon. And we also configured it to use Hyper-V dynamic memory.
Okay. The benefits, obviously, you see here is greater agility. You can dynamically scale up and down with dynamic memory. And also with the clustering that we didn't show today, but if we have clustering here, you can see that live migration, you can work it much better. You can scale your system, load balance your system.
Can you have more than one configuration file in sysprept, like what, I don't know, analysis services, for example?
It's a good point.
A batch file or something like that.
Yeah, it's a good point here. So the SQL Server sysprep supports 2 components in SQL Server today. We might enhance it in the future. So the first one is the database engine, which what Guy is showing you. The other one is reporting services. Throughout the presentation, I'll show you some demo scenario later on that Guy is talking about. But one is for database engine, one is for reporting. I'll talk through with you so that you can have an idea of how to implement that in your organization. Yep, that's a good point. Okay, so we're ready to move on to the third one, which is the self-service, right? So up to this point, we have consolidated all the database in one location. We implement clustering. We implement dynamic memory so you can scale and things like that. So it's all good, right? If we stop right there, you would say, OK, we have done consolidation virtualization. Okay? So what we're going to share with you, the next 2 things will be what Gartner and Forrester define as private cloud, right? Which essentially allows IT to not only concentrate all the IT resources in one location, but they want to start providing service to the business users, right? Let's say a sales department, finance department, or marketing department, right? So they want to be able to not only have the servers in there, but also want to have business users to run this as well. Let me show you what it means here. So we have shown you that we need to use the template. Okay, so I need to stress the importance of using template to run self-service. The reason why is IT department can create multiple templates, whether it's database engine, whether it's reporting services template, that allows them to configure each template particularly for each business unit in the organization. So you can think about a library of templates that the IT creates, right? So once you go through that exercise, okay, it's just like a video rental store scenario where the IT will be, somebody create all the assets, and then the business unit will come and rent those assets, right? And then we'll show you how they're going to do that. right? So you need to build some kind of automation. This is where System Center Virtual Machine Manager Self-Service Portal 2.0 comes in. It's a free download add-on to a Virtual Machine Manager that you can install, point to your Virtual Machine Manager that has all the templates that Guy was showing you earlier, and then start building automation. So what it does is, if you see here on the right side, once the IT person create all the templates, this tool, the self-service portal, allows business users to register themselves as a unit and request IT infrastructure. Imagine in the past that you have business unit, they want to do something, they want to deploy new application. They need to go talk to the IT department, and sometimes IT department takes longer because of maybe red tapes, whatever reason, to provision the server to the business department. We're trying to make this much faster, okay, by having this tool that basically once the IT department approves the request from the business unit can take over in terms of creation of new application, in this case deploying new VM based on the templates that they choose, and then they can decommission the VM themselves. They can deploy new ones, they can deploy multiple, it's up to them, as long as within the boundary that is being set by the IT department. Right? So IT department will make sure that we'll still have control. We'll talk about in the next pillar. But now the business user can suddenly deploy the VMs themselves, run their own applications, and then retire the applications as they need to. Okay? So with that, I would let Guy demo this to you.
Okay, thanks, Damodi. So in our publishing company scenario, the IT group wants the business units to be able to manage their own service provisioning, but at the same time it wants to keep overall control of the resources that are being used. So the way it can do this is the different business units can register with the self-service portal, and then they can make infrastructure requests, and the central IT can then approve those requests and review them. So currently I'm logged on as a sales IT admin, and the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the Virtual Machine Manager self-service portal and register a new business unit. So I'll give it a business unit name, sales, a business unit code, and then a contact email address. One reason for the contact email address is that the self-service provisioning actually supports event notifications when these different requests are approved or disapproved, and other events such as expiring assets, which I'll talk about. So the justification for this infrastructure request will be servers for store operations. So this is the registration request, and I will submit it. So now I'll go back to the central IT group, and I'm also running the self-service portal. So I'll go to requests. And I'll see that a request has come in, and I can look at the details and then approve it. So now if I go back to Sales IT Admin, I can click on View My Requests, and I'll see that my request has been approved. So having registered, now I can think, okay, I want some infrastructure so that I can start doing some provisioning, creating point-of-sale systems, for example. So I'll create an infrastructure request. Now, in particular, I want to create a point-of-sale system for the TechEd conference. So we can sell books at TechEd. And one significant thing about this is that it's temporary. After a week, we can close it down. Now, what often happens is that resources get provisioned, but then they stay around. the person who wanted the resource isn't quite so motivated to shut down the resource after they finished using it. So because of that, we can actually set a decommissioning date.
There's a question there.
Oh, there's a question, yes. So is the question that when the application is decommissioned, is it going to save the data? In this case, it sends a notification, but we're not setting up anything particular to save that data. I think in this particular scenario, it syncs the data with a central database at the end of every day. So it's not necessary in this scenario. So it's something that you would need to set up. So I'll give it an infrastructure name, TechEd. We'll say the priority is high because TechEd has kind of started. So the expected decommissioning date, we'll make it a week from now. And then business justification. Let's say we need to sell books at TechEd. So what capacity of infrastructure do I need? I'm going to say I need 2 gigabytes of memory and 200 gigabytes of storage. Now, we've requesting the infrastructure, but then every infrastructure needs some kind of service. So I would describe service as what do you want to do with the infrastructure. So I'm going to call the service sales transaction service. And I'm going to say it's a production environment. I'm going to set a billing code to the sales department. And then for this particular service, I'm going to say, OK, let's reserve 1 gigabyte of memory and 150 gigabytes of storage. And what the service also, so the service is effectively a subset of the infrastructure, but you also add a network since you're going to be doing something with this service. So I'll add a network. I will also add operators. So I'll have for the operator, it'll be the Lucerne sales operator. And then the business unit user will be the Lucerne sales user. Now, every service has a service role. So I would describe a service role as what you're actually going to be, something that's actually going to be running, something that you're actually going to provision. So the service role, it's going to be the point of sale system. So we should have all the information. So here we have the choice of specifying a template. So since we created a template for point of sale system, we can use this template. So we'll use the point of sale service. So here's a summary, and we're ready to submit the request. So I'll go back to Central IT, and I'll look at requests. So the new request has come in. However, we can't just approve this request because it actually requires some decisions. For example, which host are we going to make this infrastructure resources available from? So it highlights where we need to go in and review this request. So I'll click on Sales Transaction Service. And then I can review what's there. So the host group, all hosts, that's fine. Template libraries, I need to assign a library. So I only have one library server, that's not too challenging. And then the stored virtual machine location, where are these VHDs going to be kept, for example? So I'll select a share for that. Everything else looks OK, so I'll save and close this. Then I'll review the service role. So there's other options I can select here, like whether it requires a load balancer. As it is, this request is fine, so I'll close it. And lastly, I'll look at the virtual machine template request. So I'll review this request, and it looks fine, so I'll close it. So everything looks good, so it's OK to approve. OK, so we've approved the infrastructure request, and we also specified an operator user. So let's log on as the sales operator, sales workstation operator. And we'll go to the self-service portal. And here, there's an option now, virtual machines. We don't have any virtual machines yet, but we are allowed to create them. So we could go into Create Virtual Machine. And then we could say, let's name a virtual machine individually. And we could put in a computer name, point of sale, SQL, TechEd. Everything else looks good. Set a date for when you want it to expire. So it'll be a week from today. And then the other important thing is an email address for event notifications. So I can put salesitadmin@lucerne.msft. So now, as the sales operator, I could go create this virtual machine, and I'm ready to go. I'm not going to do it here, though, because it can take a few minutes, which we don't have. So instead, I will cancel this and show another feature of the self-service portal. I'll go back to the central IT view. And in the central IT view, if I look at infrastructure, there's an option to import virtual machines. I believe this is a new feature in Service Pack 1. They suddenly improved this feature in Service Pack 1. So I'll take a shortcut for this demo by importing the point-of-sale machine that we created earlier. So I can do a search. I'll search, just put TechEd as my search string. And it finds it, so I'll select that. And click Import. So I've successfully imported the virtual machine into the infrastructure. So now it's imported, I can log on as yet another user. I can log on as the sales workstation user. So the sales workstation user now sees this virtual machine and can then connect to it. So now this user is effectively at TechEd and ready to start selling books. This connection, I noticed in the demo, it takes a few seconds, probably because of how skimpy I am with the memory on these virtual machines running on a laptop and a couple of levels of virtual indirection. But I can reduce the tension by staring awkwardly at it. Yeah, that's a good question. So how do you actually, if you've set an expiry date, how do you then change that date? That's something that the IT group administrator can go in and change. So one option would be to, you can edit your request. Actually, I think you need to create a new request for that.
Yeah.
You need to create a new request for that. But the IT administrator can edit an existing request. So my sales user connected, and it was able to log on. So then the last thing, it will start the web application. Any other questions about this? Yes.
We've done a scenario like this using this tool set, and one of the things that I've struggled with is some of the performance optimizations for SQL Server.
Mm-hmm.
As probably everybody knows, one of the important things to do is to be particular about your disk configuration on a SQL Server to separate I/O into different ones and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Is there any way to incorporate those kinds of configurations into a SQL Server template to then be used? So I want to encourage good behavior, right, for people who are deploying lots of SQL servers on my Hyper-V infrastructure.
Right. So the question is, can you incorporate disk optimizations into the template? Well, I suppose you can have basic optimizations such as separating out your tempDB and your logging and to different VHDs. Beyond that, the optimizing really comes, I'd say it comes at the point that you approve the request and you can specify where do the resources come from. Have you had any success in kind of taking that approach?
We're not very far along with it yet. That's just one of the things we've been struggling with. How do we try to encourage good behavior?
Yeah, so I think you can encourage it with your initial template set up in kind of dividing into different VHDs. And beyond that, I think where you need to focus the optimization is in the host resources, so that then the host resource can be approved from the most optimal place. But it's an interesting scenario. In fact, I wouldn't mind talking more about that afterwards to get some ideas. So here the sales user has connected to the point of sale system. So I'll just recap with what we went through there. We registered a business unit for self-service provisioning by the IT operators. We created and approved infrastructure requests, including a service and a role. We set an expiry date. We imported a virtual machine into the self-service portal. And then we connected to the self-service portal as a sales user. We connected to the running application as a sales user.
Obviously, the benefits is faster time to market, right? In the past, that IT department maybe takes some time to provision new servers. And like what Guy said, once they provision, they might not retire them. This one, you can do it on your own from the business user perspective. So it reduces a lot of the administrator overhead, and you can do this on demand, right, from the business side, right? So again, this will become a service that IT provides for the business unit, right, realizing that. So I see there's a question there. Sorry, can.
It can if you set up the infrastructure. So can it request a clustered database server? So I think that again comes to the question of how straightforwardly can you, like, it was a similar question with the P2V migration. Can you migrate to a clustered server? So it can be done with some configuration. I guess the key is to set up the template install script so it does the appropriate discovery and installation. I know. Sorry?
I mentioned earlier in the cluster, in the virtual machine environment, if you cluster them, right, it comes with things like the live migration that I was talking about, additional functionality that only in virtual machine environment you can have, right? Versus if you have only in physical environment, you only get the HA portion, right? Plus, in the virtual machine environment, you can mix your cluster between VMs and the actual physical as well. So you can mix those, right? So there's more flexibility there. But certainly, yes, if you want to just make sure that it's only physical, you can put it in physical.
There is one caveat there, though, which is the silent installation. I don't believe it works with clustering at this point. So that's something that automated provisioning, it's not going to be that straightforward with clustering. And it's a good point.
Yeah, come talk to me afterwards, and we can talk more about that in detail.
Okay. Oh, you have another question. Okay.
Sorry, just a quick question about the live migration
since live migration is, you can do a script on that as well, but since live migration usually is manual process, it's a planned downtime scenario, right? You would know which one to move to and from.
Oh, I mean, when it does the load balancing, doesn't it?
Oh, load balancing. Yeah, load balancing. Okay.
So it would be
Yeah.
smart enough not to put them on the same.
Right. I have another question somewhere I saw.
Just a quick question to the point of disk optimization navigator. Are you guys recommending fixed or dynamic disk?
We don't recommend dynamic disks for SQL Server. So it can get quite involved, the various reasons, but basically for performance reasons, we don't recommend dynamic disks.
In the resource area on this deck, I have a resource for how to do virtualization in more optimized way. There's white paper that we publish on how to select what kind of hardware, what kind of disk settings, things like that, right, in the deck, right? So you can go and download those white papers from us.
Another question?
Along the same lines, do you see any performance differences between fixed and CSV? CSVs for SQL Server?
Actually, I might defer that question to Britt. Britt is our appliance guy, and they've been doing a lot of optimization.
So, runs really great in CSV.
It's a good
A
answer.
nice, straightforward answer.
Any other ones? I mean, this is very exciting technology. Now suddenly, not only you can virtualize, you can provide service to the business users, right? So let me cover the last one, which is the control and customize. So now business users are happy. They can provision any new application through VM templates, create new VMs, and retire them as they want to. But IT department needs to also know what's going on. So this is what the last pillar is, right? Which is the control and customize. So what happened is we want to drive standardization and compliance, so we use the template. But we also want to allow IT department to measure the usage, right? They want to know what has been provisioned, how long it is. They might want to assign particular costs for the VM templates. So when business users deploy the VM templates, they need to pay the the IT department back, like let's say end of the month, every 3 months, and so on. So there should be some kind of a usage reporting and chargeback mechanism, right? Self-service portal 2.0 provides you this kind of functionality as well for the IT department, right? So not only allows business users to provision themselves, IT department also has their own thing, which is a dashboard, which Guy will show you shortly. That allows you to see what's being used, which department, what time, what day, and things like that, and provide a chargeback value that you can create a report and send it back to the business user, right? So it's very, very powerful, and we can close this solution very well because now the IT department feels like they still have control of this rather than, okay, let the business user run things themselves, right? So Guy will demonstrate this in a while. One other final step is once you have this thing set up, right, you can continue to use Virtual Machine Manager and Operations Manager to monitor the private cloud infrastructure, right? You can set alert, like you said about load balancing, right? You can configure it in such a way, but now the IT has full control of the infrastructure, and they know when it's being provisioned, when it's not. They can go back based on the usage. Let's say create new template because maybe the existing template is not good enough, or they change the memory, change the hardware, things like that to keep optimizing this service for the business unit, right? So with that, I'll turn over to Guy again, who will show you the dashboard.
All right, thanks. So we've activated the self-service provisioning, but the IT group needs to charge each business unit for the resources that they use. And so the IT admins have assigned costs to all of the resources and deployed this self-service portal dashboard to track those costs. So to show an example of that, I'm going to go in the self-service portal, I'm going to click on Settings and configure data center resources. So if I look at the resources, I can set a specific cost per gigabyte per day for memory and for storage. I can look at infrastructures, and I can assign a specific cost to the virtual machine template, for example. And I can go into a specific service, and I can assign a cost per memory for storage for that service as well. So once all the costs are set up, then you can see reports of the usage of resources and of the chargeback for all of the business units. So I ran the SSP dashboard, and now I'm looking at infrastructure usage across the different business units. So it provides a chart, which, as Damadi says, you can run these reports. They're very configurable as well, and you can send them. And it shows the infrastructure details and the service details by different business units. Then I can also look at the resource usage. So then here's the usage of different services and virtual machines by the different business units. And I can also see, okay, what's this costing the different business units? So I can look at chargeback, and here's a monthly trend of costs. In this case, we have a filter configured, so I can set this to sales to see what the cost of the sales business unit is over time. Similarly, for the details of the business unit chargeback costs, I can set this to a specific business unit and run it. So just to recap, we can set costs for resources, infrastructures, and services, and we can use the self-service portal dashboard to run reports on the resource usage and on the costs.
So the benefits, obviously, you can enforce and standardize based on the company policy from IT department. Guy was showing you the report, different kinds of report that you can set, you can see. And it's also, the report is very customizable. It's VB script. So you can go to the report, it's basically VB script. You can tailor the report as detailed as how much you want. The data is there already, being collected by self-service portal once the VM is being deployed and things like that. So you can customize all these reports, right? Nice thing about it, the self-service portal is a free download that you can extend. One point that I want to make is this self-service portal is very much extensible. So for example, you ask a question about optimization on storage and things like that. When you actually create the VM, Guy didn't show you, there's an additional script that you can run after you create the VM. Let's say map to the right LAN, map to the, things like that you can do. It's very much extensible. When you download the self-service portal, it gives you, there's a chapter on extensibility that basically also VB script allows you to customize all this. All right, it's very, very powerful. We want to make sure that you can make use of this to provide service to your business unit. Okay? So next steps. Okay? So today we have shown you the full SQL Server for private cloud. It's good that you take this home, take this back to your office, and then you can follow this through. What we have done is we create a new web page in SQL Server Private Cloud. You can click on this today, then you can have the same information. But the nice thing about this is all the things that Guy has shown you is available today, whether it's Windows Server, whether it's Hyper-V, whether it's Virtual Machine Manager, whether it's Operations Manager, SQL Server. It's all the latest edition of our software. So you don't really need to wait like another 6 months or a year to get this thing running. So you can do it today. Right? So it's very key that, that you have there. Coming soon, this is what I'm going to refer to Brit's session today at 5, I believe. We're going to release what we call reference architecture, which is a guide, essentially, that optimized for particular hardware later this year. And then we're going to have an actual appliance, meaning that we pre-configured all the things that you see here, pre-tuned, pre-configure, everything's ready to go from the factory, so you can just use this. So if you want to know more about the appliance, which has this attribute like faster time to market, very much optimized to database workload, single point of contact for support, come to Brit's session today at 5, where he's going to talk about all kinds of appliances that Microsoft is going to ship in the near term. Right? And one of them is about private cloud running SQL Server. Okay?